If you've spent any time in Voidling Bound, you already know the game doesn't just throw you into missions with one-size-fits-all choices. Instead, it gives you a whole roster of different species to work with, each bringing something completely unique to the table. And honestly, that's where things start getting interesting, because how you build and use your Voidlings can completely change the way a mission plays out. But here's the catch. Not every species is on the same level. Sure, they all have potential if you really invest time into them, but some just perform better, feel smoother to use, and give you way more value in most situations. So in this video, we're going to break down which species stand out from the rest, which ones are worth focusing on early, and which ones might surprise you once you start using them properly. I'm quickly moving on to the video, and I'm ranking species in Voidling Bound. Before we start, if you enjoy these types of list videos, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Enjoy watching.
My friends, only 0.1% of viewers subscribe. If you like this type of content, please do not forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you in advance for your support.
The species in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Quipec and Carapin. Now this is where the B tier starts to show its true identity, and honestly, it is a mix of pretty solid and why does this feel slightly awkward to use. Quipec is your very first Voidling in Voidling Bound, so it naturally becomes the one you get attached to the most. In the early stages of the game, it actually performs better than you would expect. You can push through most early missions without really struggling, and it gives you that comfortable feeling of having a reliable starter companion by your side. The problem is that this comfort does not last forever. Once you start moving deeper into the game, Quipec begins to lose its edge pretty quickly. The damage output starts feeling underwhelming compared to other species, and fights that used to feel easy suddenly take longer than they should. If you are planning to stick with the Quipec, the real key is focusing heavily on its evolutions as early as possible, because that is the only way to keep it relevant for a longer time. Now shifting over to Carapin, this one immediately feels like it does not know what it wants to be at first glance. It has ranged attacks, but at the same time it is designed like a tank, which creates this strange hybrid confusion during gameplay. You expect it to either stay back and deal damage safely, or go in and absorb hits, but it kind of tries to do both in a very unusual way. On top of that, Carapin feels noticeably slow when you are moving it around in battles. That sluggish movement can make positioning feel a bit frustrating, especially in faster encounters where timing matters. Still, there is something interesting about its design, because if you enjoy slower, more methodical gameplay, it can actually start to make sense over time. In terms of raw effectiveness, Carapin is not exactly a weak option, but it definitely requires a specific type of player to get value out of it. If you are someone who prefers careful positioning and does not mind the slower pace, it can actually perform better than expected. That is why some players even argue it could sit closer to A tier depending on how it is used. Overall, the B tier in Voidling Bound feels like a place where consistency meets compromise. Quipec carries you early, but fades later, while Carapin feels clunky at first, but rewards patience and the right playstyle. Neither of them are bad choices, but both clearly ask you to adapt if you want to get the most out of them. The species in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Pakuran, Anami, and Guigoon. This is the point where Voidling Bound starts rewarding you for understanding mechanics instead of just pressing buttons and hoping for the best. Pakuran is one of those species that does not impress you immediately with raw basic attack damage. In fact, if you judge it too quickly, you might think it feels a bit underpowered. But that is exactly where most players get it wrong, because Pakuran is not designed to win fights through simple hits. Its real strength comes from radiation-based attacks that apply damage over time. Once enemies are infected, you basically watch their health melt down while you focus on positioning and survival. It turns fights into a slow burn rather than a burst damage race. On top of that, Pakuran can summon hatchlings to assist in combat. These little additions might not look intimidating, but they create constant pressure on enemies and help control the flow of battle in a very reliable way. When you combine radiation damage over time with summon support units, Pakuran starts feeling much more strategic than it initially appears. It rewards patience and positioning rather than aggression, which is why it comfortably sits in the A tier. Now moving over to Anami, this one has a completely different personality. It feels like a hit and move style species where standing still is basically a mistake waiting to happen. You can stay at range, land your attacks, and immediately reposition without losing momentum. Anami also brings solid crowd control tools into the mix, which makes it surprisingly safe even when enemies start closing in. You are not forced into panic situations as often because its abilities naturally create breathing room during fights. What really pushes Anami into A tier is the movement speed. It is not just about escaping danger, but also about controlling engagement. You decide when to fight, when to back off, and when to re-enter, which gives it a very fluid and flexible gameplay loop. Then there is Gwigoon, which honestly feels like the most entertaining species in this entire tier. It is the kind of unit that makes fights look chaotic in the best possible way, because suddenly you are not alone anymore. Gwigoon can summon clones to assist in battle, and these clones are more useful than they first appear. They absorb incoming damage, distract enemies, and basically create confusion on the battlefield, which gives you a lot of breathing space. The downside, of course, is that Gwigoon lacks raw power compared to higher tiers. Even with clones doing the heavy lifting in terms of distraction, you still feel that missing punch in longer fights. That is why it stays in A tier instead of climbing higher. Once evolved, Gwigoon becomes much more interesting, especially if you invest in increasing its base damage. With proper upgrades, it shifts from being just a fun distraction-based species into something that can actually hold its ground much more effectively. The species in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Ursec, Nimiod, and Morfang. When you reach the S tier in Voidling Bound, the game basically stops asking you to try hard and starts asking you to understand what broken actually means. Ursec is one of those species that immediately feels different the moment you start using it. It is not locked into a single identity because it literally offers two separate forms that completely change how you approach combat. That alone already puts it in a unique category. When you switch into the larger form, the entire idea is simple. Overwhelm everything in front of you. It becomes a straight-up power option where durability and force take priority, letting you push through enemies that would normally force you to slow down. But then you have Sec, and this is where things get interesting. Sec is all about pace, mobility, and smart repositioning. Instead of tanking hits, you are dancing around the battlefield, controlling distance, and staying unpredictable. The real strength of Ursec comes from how seamlessly you can swap between these two modes depending on the situation. It does take some time to get used to the rhythm, but once it clicks, it feels like you are playing two different species in a single kit. Then we move to Nimiod, which honestly feels like it was designed to break expectations. It is not just strong in one area, it is consistently useful in almost every situation the game throws at you. One of its most interesting tools is Proximity Spark, which allows you to hit enemies even when your aim is not perfectly aligned. That alone removes a lot of stress from combat and keeps your damage output consistent in chaotic fights. On top of that, Network Extender brings in pylons that actively assist you during battles, adding another layer of passive pressure against enemies. And when things get dangerous, Nimiod even has access to temporary invincibility, which turns boss fights into much more manageable encounters. Finally, Morfang is the definition of straightforward dominance. There is no complex setup, no tricky mechanics, just pure aggression and brute force applied directly to whatever is in front of you. If you go with the Pyro route, Morfang becomes even more dangerous, turning melee combat into a constant pressure game where enemies simply do not get the chance to recover. You close the distance, you hit hard, and you keep going until the mission is done. The video ends here. See you in another video. Don't forget to subscribe.